How does a podcast session look like? Let me show you. We've just released Casefile Presents' latest podcast called Matty. I worked as an audio producer and I wrote music for the series. In this video, I want to show you my protools session that will be for the episodes, for the music, as well as for the trailers, and how I've organized it all, what effects I used on this particular podcast. So let's dive in. Okay, so we're inside my protools session. There were few tracks. It was quite a simple project because we really had the narrator, Lauren O'Keefe, and the parents of missing son, Matty. We had Mark and Faye. The structure of the podcast was we had the narration that was interleaved throughout the series, and then we had interview done with the parents, and that was in between the narration. And that's how I structured the sessions. For one, we also had actors doing reenactments, but that was only for one episode. So straight away, we have got the main track, which is narration. And because of the use of the microphone, the studio they've recorded, the narration, especially in the later episodes, was quite noisy. And I've run them through the RX, but as you can see, we've got a neutron. That's for Lauren, using just a little bit of sculpture, EQ, compression, and I'm using transient shaper as a sort of compression on the first syllables on words. Then we've got Gulfus, but I'm only using it as a de-esser. So this bit is not affected, and I'm taming everything above 2K, so it's essentially acting as a de-esser. Then I had denoisers, and one is set to 6 and one is set to 3. That's reduction. Not each of the episodes had this kind of denoising. Some were better than others, and I'm also using normal Gulfus, but much softer and only on the mid-range of the vocal. Okay. Then we had the Lauren reverb. That's when she reads parts of other people, but it's not quote, it's more like judges, or in this instance, people reading their statements during the funeral and so on. So essentially it's the same settings, a little bit of a less denoiser if you have a look. However, I'm also using space reverb, which is convolution reverb, set in church, because this particular quotes take place in a church. But I'm also sending, so the first narration I'm sending to bus 3 and 4, and that's in this instance I've used Stratus. Okay, and here I'm also sending to Stratus. It's just a slap reverb. Lauren VO is when she reads quotes by somebody else or someone who's written something, and I'm using a simple filtering to give a different sound. So it sounds a little bit muffled, but it's not really. And I'm also using a vintage mode on the compressor, so when she reads a quote, you can hear there's a difference from the narration. And then we had the interview. So the blue tracks and clips are the interview done at Levinson's home with the parents. And for that, minimal processing. I want to keep it as natural as possible. So that's on Lauren, again, sculpting a little bit of a cue. That's Mark and Faye. So I'm trying to control the sibilance and high frequencies that occur about 3/4K, and also cutting everything below like 100 Hz, 69 Hz, and so on. Then I had the score. Now this is a stereo bounce of the score, and we'll get to that in a bit. And the score is going through a bus, so everything's going to a bus, but I'm also sending it to two verbs. separate verbs. One is spaces, which is just a concert hall verb, and one is my cinematic rooms. And again, it's just a subtle verb to make the whole music softer and fit better. That's the reverb I told you. That's the slap. I mean, it's not slap, it's just a short reverb on narration. I lift it above the interview. On the stereo bus, so everything is going through the bus. Really, it's just a simple compression to glue everything together, as well as EQ. Control is lows, and of course, cutting out everything below 50 Hz. But I'm also using inflator, 85%, curves at 0. Now I'm kind of having it less than 0, so maybe 15, 20, but for this one I use 0. It just kind of makes everything a little bit louder without distorting. And then on our master track, Ozone, again, nothing too fancy. We've got our EQ, cutting everything below 40 Hz, dynamics, bass, and the rest, and limiting set to -16. I'm using learn threshold when I bounce the files, so it writes the limiter. Then I'm using tonal balance control to check if the track is sitting within the frequency range for podcasts, and adjusting accordingly. As you can see, it gets a little bit bassy in places. Inside, that's to see the loudness, and I'm using the sound ID reference set to either my room or the headphones that I'm using for mixing, mastering, and so on. Okay, so this session was slightly different because we had reenactments done by actors, and these are these 3 tracks, and because they were acted at the same time and recorded at the same time, I left a lot. So I left the bleed and the room ambience. So when you listen to it, it hears like all these people are in the same room. It's not the real thing, but it's close to the real thing. One thing that I was doing also, as you can see, is using clip gain to really edit out and even out all these dialogues, because we can use leveler in the RX, we can use compression, but you don't want to push all of it too much. So manual editing it takes time, but it helps to give it that even feel, but also keep the dynamics of the speech. Now, people who aren't professional narrators and do the narration or record things like that, what they tend to do, they tend to start the sentence louder, and then it goes quieter when it gets to the end of that sentence. And compression will even it out a bit, but manual editing is that extra touch. There's 2 ways of doing it. So one way is, okay, we got this bit and we want to make it quiet, so you cut it and then either play with the mouse. On Mac is shift control and arrows, and that's in increments of 0.5 dB, 0.5 dB. You can go like that. Or you don't have to cut it. You just select that bit and then use your shortcuts with your shift control up and down, and you see it in a waveform. Now, this now's changed, and when we go into view and clip gain line, then we'll see that we affected the volume on that track. And as you can see, I've done it on the narration quite a bit. But because I wasn't cutting, but I was using the other method, you won't really see it unless you have that info on a clip as you can see here. So these are the beginnings of the sentences that I've lowered, as well as some breaths, loud breaths. Okay, music. So again, we have our score, which is the stereo mix down, but when this is the actual score. So that's when I was scoring all these tracks. That's the automation. And then bounced it down to a stereo track and then run the automation again. Okay, so that's the full session. All right, so this is the final session where I bounced the cues and then I imported them into episodes. And as you can see, I wrote 19 different musical cues for this show. And I've named each instrument, so violins, cello, parts, etc. So I know what I'm looking at, and essentially we had that many. This happened as I was redesigning my scoring template, so it was in between. So I didn't take the full advantage of a new template, but I did some, and I did redesign it since then as well. But anyway, so we're looking at okay, some solo. Yeah, so these were solo strings, different articulations. They're inactive now, but ensembles as well. And then we have basses, we've had keys, and we had some parts all routed to these groups, and also sort of mixed and automated. But anyway, so yeah, the cues themselves are fairly simple. There's not much sort of harmonic relationships going on. I mean, there are, but they're fairly simple. There's piano, bit of strings, and bit of parts. So this is where I started getting more into orchestral scoring. Since then, I've bought my BBC orchestra, symphonic orchestra, and I'm getting way deeper into orchestral writing. But essentially, yeah, that was it. So simple cues that, in my opinion, worked well for that particular show. Right, last but not least, this is my trailer session. So we had a couple trailers, 2-minute one and 30-second one for Spotify, which we've used also for our ads on Casefile episodes and RSS drops. Simple job. We had lines and quotes from episodes. So we had our Casefile host at the top. So he's sort of announcing the show. Then we got Lauren, her lines, the parents, and the music. What I've done is I've used the cue from the series. So it was an existing cue and I've done a music edit on that cue so it fits the trailer, bounced it, and then wrote the automation again. And all the settings are similar, essentially. These are just the bounce down trailers. But yeah, so rather than writing completely new music and score, I've used what I already have. I usually do that because then you've got that continuity, you've got the same cues, and yeah, it worked fine. So that's 2-minute one, that's 30 seconds one, and I think that's 2-minute one as well. That's usually how I work. I've got the sessions for the music. I've got sessions for the episodes. Of course, they go through many drafts. It was 4 drafts for this particular project. Not that many because, like I said, the series itself wasn't too complex in terms of how many people were involved within the sessions and recorded for the sessions. Then we've got our music, we've got our trailers as well. Since then, my approach to music writing changed a little bit, and I'll talk about it in the future. Yeah, the series is out now, 10 episodes available on Spotify for free. So Please check it out. I'm sure you'll love it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.